A tragedy whispered behind palace walls just shattered royal calm. The blow didn't come from outside, it came from within. The monarchy, already walking a delicate line between tradition and survival, is now teetering under the weight of an emotional shock that few inside the palace saw coming, least of all Prince William. To the public eye, he is poised, unwavering, a man prepared for kingship. But those close to him say the news left him stunned. His composure fractured in private as he absorbed the gravity of what had occurred. For behind those gilded gates, a quiet panic is setting in. This isn't just a health scare, it's something deeper, something that signals the unraveling of long-maintained order. Reports first emerged subtly, buried between royal engagements and optimistic statements from Buckingham Palace. The king, they said, would continue his duties while undergoing outpatient treatment for cancer. The tone was carefully chosen, firm, unshaken, serene. But it was a facade. Inside the inner circle, whispers turned into murmurs, and the murmurs became concerned. For while the king clings to his schedule, his health is deteriorating in ways the public is not meant to see. Fatigue that can no longer be hidden. Relapses, according to one source, during critical briefings. And more alarmingly, missed signatures on urgent documents errors that would have once been unthinkable for the most meticulous monarch in modern history. It's not just the illness, though that would be grave enough. It's what the illness has triggered: a power vacuum, subtle but spreading. Prince William, the heir apparent, was not expecting to assume more than ceremonial roles just yet. But the moment news of the king's condition broke inside the palace, the pressure began to mount. He was immediately briefed on matters once exclusive to his father's state paperwork, classified diplomatic memos, sensitive constitutional obligations. It wasn't a formal handover, not yet, but the implication was undeniable. William would need to start preparing, and that realization hit harder than anyone anticipated. According to insiders, William was not emotionally ready for the scale of responsibility, subtle but suddenly placed on his shoulders. There was frustration, even grief, not just for the man he might lose, but for the role he was being forced into sooner than expected. Those close to him describe a moment of stillness, a rare pause in his typically unshakable demeanor. One aide said it was as if everything he thought he had time to prepare for was being thrown at him without warning. The palace, meanwhile, maintained its composed exterior, but inside, tensions were boiling. This wasn't just about health. Anymore, it was about legacy, leadership, and who controls the direction of the monarchy. Some senior courtiers began to view William's growing involvement as both necessary and threatening. Necessary because the institution cannot stall. Threatening because Charles, even as he weakens, is not ready to relinquish control. One insider bluntly stated, "The king is allergic to being managed even by his own son," and just like that, the emotional blow became political. The tragedy referred to by palace insiders isn't solely the king's diagnosis. It's the potential fracture in the royal line of command. Two monarchs in waiting, father and son, now find themselves circling the same seat of power, neither ready to step down, neither ready to let go. It is this collision of generational willpower, hidden behind polite nods and public unity, that is quietly tearing at the fabric of the monarchy. But to understand why the king is spiraling, we must go back to the moment William began assuming more than his share. For years, William stood patiently in his father's shadow. Now, he's stepping forward, but the crown isn't ready to let go. In the quiet corridors of power, Prince William's transformation hasn't gone unnoticed. No longer the young heir shadowing his father's every move, William has become a force. In his own right, a man driven by purpose, sharpened by years of scrutiny, and now standing at the threshold of a kingdom in flux. The weight of the crown may still rest on King Charles's head, But William's hands are already guiding its future. And yet the monarchy he seeks to reshape may not be as willing to yield. Those close to the prince say he has long harbored ambitions not of grandeur, but of reform. His vision isn't about upending the institution, it's about saving it. In William's eyes, the monarchy must evolve or perish. He envisions a stripped-down royal family, fewer titles, more transparency, deeper connection with the public. A monarchy that doesn't just survive modern times, but leads within them. But this mission puts him on a collision course with the man who raised him, the man who now holds the throne. King Charles, after decades as heir, finally ascended with a vision of his own, one steeped in legacy, ritual, and the preservation of centuries-old customs. He sees himself as a steward of tradition, not a revolutionary. As every move reflects an allegiance to the past, a reverence, William quietly believes, is holding the monarchy back. And that belief, once whispered in private, is now beginning to shape his public role. The result is an invisible tug-of-war, a father unwilling to release the reins, a son determined not to wait. Palace insiders have noticed the subtle shifts. William taking more initiative in foreign diplomacy, engaging directly with parliament members, and commanding royal engagements with a sharpened authority. These aren't ceremonial upgrades, they're signals. Signals that the future king isn't content to wait for history to hand him the crown. He intends to shape it himself. But this ambition doesn't sit comfortably in the current royal structure. Those loyal to Charles see William's moves as premature, if not insubordinate. They say his growing assertiveness borders on challenging the king's authority. And while the palace maintains a polished image of unity, behind the scenes, the friction is growing. Meetings once marked by warm consultation are now clouded with formality. William determined to modernize. Charles resolved to hold the line. The tension is no longer just philosophical, it's generational. William represents a shift the monarchy is unprepared for. He understands the public's waning patience with royal extravagance. He knows the high importance of social relevance. His press team crafts narratives that lean into humility, accessibility, and authenticity. In contrast, Charles's communications remain rooted in ceremony and duty, reflective of a time when reverence was assumed, not earned. And yet, for all their differences, it's the love between them that makes this struggle more painful. William is not rebelling out of defiance. He's stepping up because he sees urgency, because he believes his father, noble as he is, may not have the time or energy to lead the institution through its most vulnerable era. But in pushing forward, he is forcing a reckoning, one that the monarchy may not be emotionally or structurally ready for. The palace is now a chessboard. Each appearance, each statement, each leaked detail plays into the power dynamic shifting beneath the surface. As William rises, Charles resists. But time is not on the king's side, and William knows it. He's not staging a coup. He's preparing for survival. And that is perhaps the most unsettling truth of all. And just as William pushed forward, another royal chose to walk away entirely. Prince Harry just erased 1,000 years of tradition with a single word, Spencer. The decision, when it broke, stunned even the most seasoned royal commentators. Harry, the once proud Duke of Sussex, had legally and symbolically cut ties with the very institution that shaped his life. No more Mountbatten-Windsor, no more lineage reaching back through kings, queens, and centuries of empire. In its place, a single devastating syllable, Spencer. His mother's name, Diana's name, a name that now stands as a quiet rebellion, echoing louder than any speech he's ever made. This wasn't just a change in paperwork, it was a declaration of identity, a statement not whispered in private, but shouted through legal channels and across international headlines. For Harry, this was personal. The royal name he shed wasn't just a surname, It was a burden. It was the family crest that stood silently by as he and Meghan were isolated, vilified, and eventually driven across the Atlantic. It was the name that wrapped him in protocol and press coverage from the moment he was born, and never once shielded him when he needed protection most. By embracing Spencer, Harry wasn't just honoring Diana. He was choosing her. He was choosing the side of empathy, vulnerability, and rebellion against a system that devoured his mother and nearly did the same to him. Insiders say the name change had been a long time coming. It had lived in his mind through sleepless nights and whispered conversations, and when the papers were finally signed, it marked the end of one era and the unmistakable beginning of another. For King Charles, the move struck like a dagger to the heart. The monarchy he fought so hard to preserve was being publicly rejected by his own son. To the king, this wasn't just defiance, it was betrayal, and not just of royal protocol, but of lineage, legacy, and blood. Sources close to Charles described the atmosphere at Clarence House as tense and grief-stricken. While he has grown accustomed to Harry's emotional distance, nothing could have prepared him for this. For the first time, Charles was forced to confront the reality that his youngest son no longer identified with the very institution he was born into. And it wasn't only Charles who felt the sting. The royal establishment, with its obsession over tradition and continuity, saw the move as heresy. Never before had a senior royal so deliberately removed themselves from the family name while still occupying a place in public memory. It challenged every unspoken rule about blood, duty, and identity. More than a departure, it was a rejection, a final irreparable break from the myth of unity they so desperately clung to. But for Harry, it was clarity. It was healing. He was no longer the spare bound by hierarchy, no longer the soldier prince carrying the palace's contradictions. He was his mother's son, nothing more and nothing less. And in taking her name, he wasn't just distancing himself from the monarchy. He was declaring that his story would not be written by them, that he was reclaiming control. Yet, even as Harry embraced a new identity, the cost of that decision was mounting. The monarchy may have lost to Prince, but Harry was about to lose much more. But Harry wasn't just breaking tradition. He was also paying a hefty price for his freedom. He fought the crown, and the price tag is staggering. Prince Harry's quest to reclaim his security, his dignity, and his sense of justice came with a cost no one expected. And that cost wasn't just emotional or symbolic. It was financial, brutally, publicly, and for many, unforgivably so. When he launched a legal battle against the British government to retain taxpayer-funded police protection after stepping down as a working royal, Harry framed it as a matter of safety, of principle. But for the crown and the country, it became a question of loyalty, entitlement, and the burden of consequence. It began as a plea for security, quickly turned into a high-profile clash that left the Duke both humiliated and financially cornered. The numbers are jaw-dropping. According to Freedom of Information disclosures, the Home Office spent more than $656,000 on legal fees defending its decision to strip Harry of the privileges he once took for granted. The court battle spanned years, appealed to multiple levels, and brought together elite legal teams. During those numbers was a breakdown that painted a damning picture. Over $241,000 spent on barristers alone, nearly $394,000 on solicitors, and thousands more on filing fees, administrative costs, and legal prep. It was a staggering display of just how far the British government was willing to go to hold its ground, and just how far Harry was willing to go to challenge it. But when the judgment finally arrived, it was crushing. Harry lost. What only did the court rule against him, reaffirming that his exit from royal duties severed his access to royal protections. but it also opened the floodgates for financial fallout. The ruling was clear. As the losing party, Harry was expected to cover up to 90% of the government's costs, add in his own undisclosed legal expenses, rumored to push the total well past $1.5 million. And what you're left with is a financial disaster masquerading as a moral crusade. In the late royal circles, the resentment was palpable. Courtiards who once defended Harry behind closed doors now saw him as a liability. One insider described the ordeal as a tragic display of pride over prudence. The sentiment was no longer sympathetic. It was skeptical. Why fight for protection you voluntarily walked away from? Why drag the monarchy through headlines that only deepened public division? The legal battle, in the eyes of many, wasn't about protection. It was about proving a point. And that point came at the expense of the institution he once called home. Public reaction wasn't much kinder. For royal loyalists and neutral observers alike, the lawsuit became a line in the sand. It painted Harry not as a protective father or exiled prince, but as a man unwilling to accept the consequences of his own choices. The court's ruling, combined with the financial burden placed on taxpayers, led to a chilling shift in perception. Suddenly, Harry wasn't just seen as distant. He was being framed as irresponsible, even reckless. And with every leaked figure, with every pound spent, the gap between Harry and his homeland grew wider. Yet, as Harry's war raged in courtrooms, the king was waging a quieter battle in his own body. Harry doesn't stop for kings, but Charles refuses to stop for cancer. Despite the quiet murmurs from his aides and the urgent whispers of doctors behind closed palace doors, King Charles continues to press forward, determined to show the world, and perhaps himself, that the crown he waited a lifetime to wear won't be dimmed by illness. Outpatient treatment may be ongoing, the medications may be unrelenting, and the fatigue more crushing than ever. Charles moves with the same ceremonial grace he always has, shaking hands, delivering speeches, and reviewing state documents, as if nothing has changed. But everything has changed. Beneath the surface, the king's body is fighting a silent war, and behind the curtain, the palace is bracing for what comes next. He made an appearance recently at a key royal event, flanked not by Queen Camilla, but by Princess Alexandra, a calculated choice that raised more than a few eyebrows. Camilla's absence was explained away by scheduling, but those close to the situation tell a different story. They say Charles insisted on attending against medical advice. He demanded that the calendar remain unchanged, that his face still be seen by the public, that the monarchy continue, even as his body warned him to stop. It wasn't just duty, it was desperation, the desperate need to maintain control in a world where even kings are reminded of their mortality. Behind the regal facade is a man increasingly worn down by relentless expectation. The pressure to uphold stability in a monarchy already rattled by family fractures is immense. His days are filled with decisions that affect not just his family, but the future of an entire institution. Yet despite this, Charles still chooses protocol over rest, appearances over healing. His aides, deeply concerned, have quietly begged Camilla to intervene to speak to her husband, to convince him to ease the load. But their pleas have gone unanswered. Some say she's turning a blind eye. Others whisper something more chilling, that she isn't just allowing this, she's encouraging it. The emotional cost of Charles's relentless devotion is becoming harder to ignore. Insiders say he's grown quieter, more withdrawn, sometimes forgetting small details he once prided himself on. He brushes off concerns, citing stress and age, but the symptoms speak louder than the monarch ever could. Every step he takes in public is a performance of strength, and every step behind the scenes is paid for in private exhaustion. But there is no room for pause, no public admission of weakness. In his eyes, The monarchy must remain untouched, even if he is unraveling inside. And so the palace watches in silence, William stepping up, Harry stepping away, and Charles fighting the tide with everything he has left. There's a tension in the air, a growing realization that the man holding the scepter may not have the time he once believed. But still, he refuses to rest, refuses to let the illness define his reign. But Camilla's silence may not be selfless. It may be strategic. She smiled through it all, but insiders say she's watching the throne. As King Charles pushes himself beyond the limits of his fragile health, there is one figure who remains curiously calm in the chaos: Queen Camilla. To the public, she offers quiet reassurance. But within the palace, her silence is starting to raise eyebrows. Aides begged her to speak up, to stop Charles from spiraling into exhaustion. Yet she stayed quiet. And now whispers are getting louder. Is this neglect or calculation? While Charles clings to tradition and power, Camilla seems to be watching from a distance. Not with concern, but with something more deliberate, something more poised. Behind palace walls, Camilla's ambitions are no longer just the stuff of court gossip. Papers say she set her sights on roles that have long been held exclusively by Charles. One in particular stands out: the patronage of the British Gardening Museum, a symbolic position that Charles has cherished for decades. It may sound minor to the outside world, but inside the monarchy, patronages are currency. They are visibility, influence, and legacy. And Camilla, it seems, is ready to hold more of them in her own name. For a queen consort, this is no small step. It signals a subtle shift from standing beside the king to stepping into his shadow. This quiet rise hasn't gone unnoticed. Palace courtiers now speak of Camilla's growing influence with a tone of unease. Where once she was dismissed as an outsider, still earning her place, she now commands attention in internal meetings, weighs in on long-term engagements, and has even begun to shape royal messaging around the king's health. Her confidence is striking, her timing impeccable. And while she maintains the posture of loyal wife, there are those who see the makings of something far more complex beneath her polished image. Perhaps most telling of all is the silent, simmering tension between Camilla and Prince William. Their relationship has always been civil, but it was never warm. Now it feels strained. As William steps forward to protect the monarchy's future, Camilla appears to be claiming pieces of its present. Their visions don't align, and neither does their approach. William pushes for modernization and clarity. Camilla, by contrast, moves through tradition, subtly reinforcing her own relevance in the wake of Charles's growing weakness. In strategy, they are opposites. In ambition, perhaps not so different. So the question that has begun to haunt the palace is one no one dares say aloud. Who's really steering the monarchy? Is it the king fighting to stay upright, the son preparing to take the reins, or the queen quietly positioning herself to outlast them both? What was once seen as a marriage rooted in redemption is now beginning to look like a calculated alliance, one where Camilla's role could extend far beyond what anyone anticipated. And while Charles clings to control his youngest, some remains exiled from truth. The phone never rang, the palace never called, and Harry was left guessing. As King Charles faced a battle for his health, one voice remained notably absent from the updates. One figure kept entirely in the dark: his youngest son. Prince Harry, now oceans away, wasn't just left out of royal briefings. He was intentionally shut out. Sources close to the palace confirmed what Harry himself had suspected for months. This was no oversight. It was a decision. Deliberate, calculated, painful. The royal family, already fractured by public scandal and private wounds, had drawn its lines clearly, and Harry was now on the outside of all of them. In Montecito, far from Buckingham's gates and Windsor's whispers, Harry waited. News came to him not from aides or relatives, but from headlines and rumors. He would read about royal appearances and health updates online just like the rest of the world. And with every passing day, the silence grew heavier. Not one message, not one call from his father's team, no briefing, no reassurance, just a deafening void where connection used to be. And in that silence, something inside Harry began to crack. Because this wasn't about protocol, it was about trust, or rather, the absence of it. Meghan, ever composed, took the silence as a sign to keep moving forward. Her focus sharpened. Her ambitions widened. She had always been practical, driven, and unafraid to create her own future. Business ventures thrived. Projects advanced. She navigated their exile like a strategist in command. But Harry? He struggled. He had hoped that illness would bridge what years of tension had torn apart, that a father's vulnerability might soften what tradition had hardened. Instead, the distance only grew more obvious. Meghan built. Harry grieved. The contrast was striking. Meghan stood as a symbol of resilience, rebranding, relaunching, rebounding with clarity and speed. She knew what she wanted and how to get there. But Harry remained suspended between two worlds, no longer royal, but never fully free. His emotions tethered him to a past that wouldn't release him, even as it refused to welcome him back. And with each palace decision to exclude him, with each passing moment of silence, his pain deepened into something harder. Sharper the trail. Those close to the Sussexes say Harry began to feel not just forgotten, but erased, as if his voice no longer mattered, as if his love for his father, for the crown, for his homeland, none of it could override the scars left behind by years of tension. He had walked away, yes, but he had not stopped caring. And that, perhaps, was his greatest torment. Because while he was being painted as the rebel, the rogue, the one who broke the royal code, he was still waiting, still hoping, still hurting. Then came Harry's final cry for connection, a televised plea that stunned the world. I don't know how long he has left. The words shattered Buckingham's silence. Prince Harry's voice cracked, not with anger, but with something far more devastating. Raw, unfiltered grief. In a BBC interview that no one in the royal establishment saw coming, he spoke with the kind of honesty that's rarely allowed in the monarchy. He didn't dodge. He didn't dance around the question. He delivered a blow straight to the heart of the royal mystique. And in doing so, he exposed wounds that the palace had desperately tried to hide. For the first time, the public heard what had only been whispered behind palace walls. King Charles's health may be more dire than anyone dared admit, and the silence between father and son has now turned into a void. It wasn't just the words, it was the tremble behind them. Harry admitted he hadn't spoken to his father. He confessed that updates were sparse, that he was left to guess how bad things really were. His voice wavered when he said, "He won't speak to me." And in that moment, the prince who once stood behind his mother's coffin as a boy became something else entirely, a son, broken by rejection. The interview wasn't strategic. It wasn't rehearsed. It was a cry, a final attempt to reach through the silence, not just for himself, but for the man he still calls father. The impact was immediate. The public, already watching the monarchy fracture under pressure, suddenly saw the emotional cost in stark relief. Headlines lit up. Social media exploded. Viewers around the world responded not with outrage, but with stunned empathy. For all the criticism Harry has faced for the documentaries, the memoir, the lawsuits, this moment hit differently. This wasn't about celebrity. It was about family. And for a royal institution built on image and restraint, Harry's vulnerability felt like an earthquake. Inside the palace, however, the response was ice-cold. Not a word was issued in return. No statement. No call. Just silence. Senior aides were furious. Royal biographers whispered what many had long suspected. The trust. Your father and son is not just damaged. It's likely beyond repair. One courtier, speaking anonymously, said, "There are things you simply don't say. Not in public. Not like that." But Harry had said them, and there was no turning back. In a single interview, Harry broke open what the Crown had tried to keep locked away, a truth too painful for official letters or royal press releases. That even as the King of England battles cancer, he cannot or will not mend the most personal of rifts. That even as time runs out, pride stands taller than reconciliation. The monarchy may endure, the rituals may continue, but the heart of the family is fractured and it's bleeding in plain sight. And in the chaos of it all, one truth is clear. The House of Windsor is under siege. This is not just a family feud. It's a constitutional crisis in the making. The House of Windsor, long upheld as a symbol of continuity and control, now finds itself splintered from within. At the very moment when the monarchy should be projecting unity, strength, and stability, it is instead fractured across three fault lines: a king battling illness, an heir growing restless, and a son cast adrift. These aren't isolated struggles. They're colliding, cracking the very foundation that holds the crown in place. The queen is gone. The king is weakening. And what remains is a royal machine straining to hide the chaos bubbling beneath its golden surface. King Charles' condition is no longer a whisper behind closed doors. It is a looming shadow over every royal engagement, every public statement, every decision. His insistence on continuing his duties is beginning to look less like strength and more like stubborn denial. And as his physical presence weakens, so does the sense of certainty about who is steering the monarchy's future. Prince William, in turn, is stepping forward, but not with the crown's blessing. His rise feels urgent, almost aggressive. And while some see it as preparedness, others whisper that it's something else entirely, a power grab cloaked in duty. Then there's Harry, the estranged son, whose every word now sends shockwaves across continents. His decision to take his mother's name, his legal battles, his televised confession. He's not simply separated from the monarchy, he's untethered from it, a free agent with royal blood and a microphone. And it's this unpredictable third force, this emotional wild card, that further destabilizes the monarchy's delicate balance. For how can the crown pretend to stand united when its own bloodline is scattered, hurt, and mistrusting? Perhaps worse, this isn't just an internal matter anymore. The British public sees it, the Commonwealth sees it, and the younger generation, raised on transparency and authenticity, is beginning to turn its gaze elsewhere. To them, the pageantry feels hollow. The monarchy's relevance, once assumed, is now questioned. Increasingly, people are asking not who will lead, but should it still exist at all? And for an institution built on myth, the crumbling of perception may be even more dangerous than the unraveling of power. Inside the palace, they still move through the motions, titles, ceremonies, protocols, but behind every bow is a brittle truth. Trust is broken, relationships have eroded, and the line of succession is clouded by grief, ego, and fear. The royal family may still occupy the throne. The unity that once made them untouchable is gone. The cracks aren't forming, they've already formed. As the crown teeters on the edge, one question remains: how long before it all collapses? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next.